Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is politics reporter Sarah Dorn. Sarah, I appreciate you coming on.
Hi, Brittany. Thank you for having me.
As you know, this weekend, another flying object was shot down, and this comes after we first saw back in January a suspected Chinese balloon over Montana, and that was shot down earlier this month. Can you give us a timeline of what has happened from then until now?
So on February 2nd, the US government announced that a suspected Chinese surveillance balloon was hovering over Billings, Montana, not far from one of the US's three nuclear silo fields. We later learned that this balloon was first spotted over Alaska on January 28th. 2 days later, on February 4th, the balloon had traveled from Montana just off the coast of South Carolina, where the US military then destroyed it. About a week later, on Friday, another balloon, what we now know is a balloon, we do not know the origins or if it was in any way connected to the Chinese, was shot down over Alaska. On Saturday, again, what we know is a balloon, but unclear if it's connected to the Chinese or what its origins were, was shot down over Canada, over the Yukon, about 100 miles from the US border. And then on Sunday, another object, it's being described as an octagonal object, was shot down over Lake Huron and fell into Canadian territory. So recovery efforts are still underway at all four sites, but it's been, a sort of a hysteria has surrounded this phenomenon because we have never really seen this happen at all, and to have four events within the span of 8 days is definitely unprecedented.
A lot of balloons, a lot of flying objects. I want to know just how unprecedented this is. Does the US government shoot down flying objects a lot or at all? Or is this just getting more hype because of the initial suspected Chinese spy balloon?
So I personally have not heard of this happening, at least in recent years. And the government has said that a total of five, what they suspect are Chinese surveillance balloons, were detected during Trump's and Biden's presidencies. The three balloons that flew over the US during Trump's presidency were not detected until Biden took office. And the White House said today, National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby gave a press briefing and said that the Biden administration held a daily intelligence briefing. These briefings are again daily, but they held an intelligence briefing dedicated solely to the balloon as early as June 2021. So it really just kind of puts an exclamation point on how far back this phenomenon dates. And since then, the Biden administration has really ramped up its efforts to detect these flying objects. And Kirby said today, one of the reasons that we have seen more of them is naturally because they have enhanced radar capabilities. He has maintained that, the Chinese were not able to glean a ton of information from the suspected suspected spy balloon that was shot down over the Atlantic on February 4th. And the three other objects, again, we don't know their origins or what they were used for, but he did warn that if they enhance their capabilities, they could gather more intelligence that could potentially be a threat to our military operations.
We know China was involved with at least one of these objects. Has China taken any culpability for this?
No, and they have been very critical of the United States for shooting down the balloon over the Atlantic Ocean. They called it an indiscriminate use of force and have maintained that that object was a civilian operated device used for weather research purposes.
What is this doing to US China relations? Because they were icy to begin with. They've been icy pretty much since Biden took presidency. How is this worsening them?
Absolutely. Secretary of State Antony Blinken canceled a planned visit to Beijing. He was scheduled to leave on February 3rd. This is obviously the day before the balloon was taken down over South Carolina. And we heard today that he could possibly, this weekend, there is a conference in Munich of global leaders, that he could possibly meet with a Chinese diplomat, which would be, the first meeting that we know of between U.S. and Chinese government officials since this began.
We know that the first object was a suspected Chinese spy balloon. The details are a little less apparent about the other three objects. I have to ask, are these alien related? Any extraterrestrial activity? What do we know about that front?
So the New York Times raised this question to NORAD commander Glenn Van Herk yesterday, and it was Sunday, in a press call with reporters, and he sort of left open the possibility and said he wasn't ruling anything out, which created a ton of speculation that the White House was forced to respond to today. Karine Jean-Pierre, White House press secretary, opened her daily briefing by saying there is no evidence that there is alien or extraterrestrial activity, in connection with any of these four flying objects that have been taken down over the past, 2 weeks. And that was reiterated by National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby as well. So as we know, according to what we know now, these balloons and the additional device that was shot down over Lake Huron on Sunday were manufactured here on Earth.
The White House is ruling out aliens, but are there any other details that they provided today, especially during Karine Jean-Pierre's press briefing?
So John Kirby did say that no communication signals were detected in the three most recent objects that were shot down. He did not acknowledge that any of them were balloons. Now, before this unfolded over Lake Huron on Sunday, Chuck Schumer, in an appearance on one of the Sunday talk shows, did say that intelligence officials believe that the balloons shot down over Alaska on Friday and Canada on Saturday are balloons. And that was the first confirmation that we really heard of that. The object that was shot down over Lake Huron is being described as an octagonal object. We know that they are smaller in size than the Chinese surveillance balloon, which measures approximately the size of 3 school buses. And we also know that they were flying at a much lower altitude than the Chinese surveillance balloon. And one of the main reasons that John Kirby gave today for the takedown of these 3 most recent objects is because they were flying on the threshold of civilian airspace, while the Chinese surveillance balloon was at 60,000 feet, which is, far outside of where any air traffic would be. But there are really few details on what exactly the origins and purpose of these 3 most recent objects are.
At every Super Bowl party, I'm sure there had to be talk of this. I know at mine there was. And people they don't know the details. Is the White House being tight-lipped purposefully over this? Or is their response adequate?
I mean, I would certainly say it's a matter of national security, and they, have alluded to that. They don't typically share intelligence secrets with the American public, but there has been criticism of transparency issues on both sides of the aisle of the Biden administration. I mean, lawmakers expressed shock when they found out that 5 total balloons have been discovered, that we know of during the Trump and Biden administrations. And the Trump officials themselves have said that they did not know about them. And the White House has, offered to give a briefing to former Trump officials, and they held a briefing of the full Congress last week. But lawmakers have really hammered the Biden administration for failing to disclose this information sooner and have called for continued briefings on this. So this is an issue that's not going away. And I do want to note that this is, the second issue that has raised concerns of transparency within the Biden administration in a matter of weeks. We saw the same thing with the discovery of classified documents at his home in Delaware and his former office at a think tank in Washington. Republicans were very upset that the first discovery had been made, right before the November midterm election, but was not publicly disclosed until January. So the White House is offering a few details as of now, and they're really facing pressure from members of Congress to be more forthcoming about this, and members of the media, of course.
It's kind of interesting in both of those, scandals that you've talked about. They happened to Trump, both the documents and the flying objects. They also happened to Biden. Do you think that's working in Biden's favor, since he can point and say, both of these also happened to my predecessor?
Well, I noticed when John Kirby was talking about the timeline of events and when they, discovered this balloon surveillance program, he really wanted to hammer home that the Biden administration made this discovery, not the Trump administration. So, I think that they are definitely trying to play that up, and their approach and the entire reason that they say these balloons, so many balloons have been detected in the last month, is because they have taken a firmer stance against these surveillance programs and have really ramped up protocols. So I would say that that's something they're trying to play up. Whether, as more information unfolds and we learn exactly what happens, whether that narrative will hold true and hold up against Congress members who are being very critical of the administration thus far is yet to be seen. But at the same time, as we have seen lawmakers be critical about the failure to disclose the surveillance program sooner, we have seen lawmakers on both sides of the aisle commend the administration for its handling of what has happened so far. Mitt Romney is someone who has done that, a Republican, and then obviously, Democrats have been very supportive of the Biden administration's response.
From what we know now, is this surveillance program, the balloons, the flying objects, are these threats to American security?
The White House has said no. Again, particularly in regard to the three most recent objects, they were not detecting any communication signals, no maneuvering or propulsion capabilities, and even the Chinese surveillance balloon, very limited information gathering potential, though they have said that they have the ability to take very clear imagery, this Chinese surveillance balloon in particular, and that they were flying over sensitive military sites. As I mentioned earlier in our conversation, when the balloon was hovering near Billings, Montana, that is very close to one of the U.S.'s 3 nuclear silo fields. So in terms of civilian threats on the ground, no, we have not heard that thus far.
Sarah Dorn, as there's updates to this story, I hope you come back and join me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brittany.